He had learned to wake before the alarm. 49 years old, still in uniform, still wired to rise before the day asked him to. Colonel Daniel Rowe lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the base housing around him. Somewhere far off, a transport engine groaned. Afghanistan had taught him that silence wasn't peace. It was simply a pause. He checked the clock. Too early for calls. Too early for news. That was when his phone vibrated. One message. No name attached. He read it once, then again. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe the channel and let me know in the comments where are you watching from. It helps more than you know. Daniel frowned, dismissed it, and swung his legs off the bed. He'd deal with distractions later. Right now he had leave paperwork to sign, and a flight home that had been moved up without ceremony. No welcome banners. No calls ahead. He wanted it that way. Thanksgiving was 3 days out, and for the first time in years, he would be home before it began. No checkpoints, no dust, no radios crackling in his ear. Just a front door, a familiar driveway, and his daughter, 15 years old now. That number sat heavy in his chest. 15 meant old enough to pretend she didn't need him, young enough that she still did. Daniel hadn't told his wife he was coming early. He wanted the look on her face, the normalcy of it, a surprise that didn't involve uniforms or apologies. The flight landed just after dawn. Cold air slapped his face as he stepped onto the jet bridge. Jacket pulled tight over civilian clothes that felt strange after months of camo. He drove the rental east with the radio off, watching the sky turn from slate to pale gold. Home looked the same. White siding, neatly trimmed hedges. A place that advertised safety without ever having to say it. But something was wrong. No car in the driveway. No porch light. The house felt empty before he even touched the door. Inside, the air was stale, not abandoned but unused. No coffee brewing. No shoes by the stairs. No music drifting from the hallway. "Hey," he called out. "I'm home." Nothing answered. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time. His daughter's room was spotless. Too spotless. The bed was made tight, corners tucked with a precision she didn't have. Her backpack was gone, her phone charger missing. The wall where photos usually hung had bare hooks. Daniel stood there longer than he should have. Training kicked in, not fear, assessment. He called his wife, straight to voicemail. He tried again. This time she answered. "You're early," she said, voice tight. "Where is she?" Daniel asked. A pause. "She's with my father," his wife replied. "Just for a few days." Daniel closed his eyes once. "Why wasn't I told? You were overseas." She snapped. "I handled it. You don't handle decisions like that alone." "She's been difficult," his wife continued. "Disrespectful." He offered to help. Help. Daniel felt something shift behind his ribs. "Where," he said carefully, "is my daughter?" Another pause. Longer this time. "At the property near Redfield," she said. "You know the one." Daniel did know it. An old farmhouse on the edge of nowhere. No neighbors close, no cell service. A place that smelled of dust and control. "You sent her there without asking me," he said. "She needs discipline," his wife insisted. "You're never here." Daniel ended the call. He didn't shout. He didn't slam the phone. He grabbed his keys. The drive took hours. Roads narrowed. Pavement cracked. Trees pressed in close, bare branches clawing at the sky. The further he went, the quieter the world became. Daniel parked at the edge of the property and got out. The house stood ahead, smoke rising from a chimney. Too calm. He noticed the ground first. Dragged footprints, broken leaves, a path that didn't belong. Daniel moved faster. Around the side of the barn he saw her. His daughter sat on the ground near a fence post, wrists bound, shoulders shaking. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears she hadn't bothered to wipe away. She looked up slowly. "Dad?" she whispered. Everything inside him went cold. Not rage. Not yet. Focus. "I'm here," he said, crossing the distance, hands already working at the restraints. "You're safe now." She collapsed into him, trembling. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said. "I know," Daniel replied, holding her close. Behind them, the barn door creaked in the wind, and somewhere inside that quiet property, a man had just made the worst mistake of his life. Daniel did not rush. He lifted his daughter carefully, as if speed might shatter her. She clung to him with a strength that didn't match her size. fingers digging into his jacket like proof he was real. "I've got you," he said again, quieter now. "I'm not leaving." Her breathing was uneven, shallow. He felt the tremor in her shoulders and catalogued it without comment. Shock, exposure, fear layered over something worse. He guided her toward the truck, keeping his body between her and the barn. He didn't look back yet. He didn't need to. Inside the cab, he wrapped her in a blanket from the back seat and turned the heat on high. She stared straight ahead, jaw locked. "Did he hurt you?" Daniel asked, voice steady. She nodded once. That was enough. Daniel handed her his phone. "Call emergency services. Tell them where we are." She hesitated. "He said if I told, he doesn't get to decide that anymore," Daniel said. She dialed with shaking hands. While she spoke, Daniel stepped out and walked back toward the barn. He moved slowly, deliberately. No threats, no raised voice. His father-in-law stood just inside the doorway, arms crossed, expression offended more than afraid. "You had no right," the man began. Daniel stopped 3 steps away. "You restrained a minor," Daniel said evenly. "You isolated her. You harmed her. She needed structure," the man scoffed. "You're never around. Someone had to teach her respect." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Respect is not taught with rope." The man's lips thinned. "This is family." "No," Daniel replied. "This is a crime." Sirens sounded faintly in the distance. The man's confidence wavered. "You wouldn't dare turn this into a spectacle." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. By the time deputies arrived, Daniel had already documented the scene. Photos, timestamps, the exact condition of the restraints, the state of the property. The man protested loudly as he was separated and questioned. Daniel stayed with his daughter, answering when asked, offering nothing extra. At the hospital, the lights were too bright. Daniel sat beside her bed while doctors worked. He held her hand when she flinched at sudden movements. He didn't ask for details. Not yet. When the nurse stepped out, Daniel leaned closer. "You don't have to tell me everything now," he said. "But you will never have to face this alone." She nodded, eyes glossy. "He said you wouldn't come." Daniel swallowed. He was wrong. Hours later, as paperwork stacked and officials rotated through, Daniel stepped into the hallway and made his first call. Not to a friend, not to a favor, to a legal officer he trusted. "I need guidance," Daniel said. "By the book." The response was immediate. "Then we proceed slowly and visibly." Next came a call to a child advocacy coordinator he'd worked with stateside during joint operations. She listened without interrupting. "This will not stay local," she said when he finished. "And it shouldn't," Daniel agreed. His wife arrived near midnight. She stopped short when she saw the bruises, the bandages, the way her daughter wouldn't look at her. "This was supposed to help," she whispered. Daniel turned to her, exhaustion heavy but contained. "You handed our child to someone who wanted control, not correction." Tears slid down her cheeks. "I didn't think he'd." "You didn't check," Daniel said. "That's worse." The room went quiet. Later, alone again, Daniel opened a notebook. He wrote names, dates, decisions. He mapped the chain of responsibility the same way he once mapped patrol routes. Who knew? Who decided? Who stayed silent? This was not revenge. This was accountability. By morning, a temporary protection order was issued. No contact, no access, no excuses. Daniel signed without hesitation. As he packed to leave the hospital, his daughter finally spoke again. "Are we going home?" Daniel met her eyes. "We're going somewhere safe." She nodded, trusting him with an ease that hurt. As they walked out into the pale morning light, Daniel knew the hardest part was over. What remained would be quieter, more procedural, and far more devastating for the man who had believed isolation was protection. Because Daniel Rowe had spent a lifetime learning how systems worked, and now every one of them was about to turn. They stayed with a friend that first night, not someone from Daniel's unit. Someone quiet, someone who asked no questions and offered a spare room without comment. The kind of civilian normalcy Daniel had learned to value more than medals. His daughter slept for nearly 12 hours. Daniel didn't. He sat at the kitchen table with his notebook open, pen resting between his fingers, reviewing what he already knew and what he still needed to confirm. He didn't speculate. He documented. That habit had kept people alive overseas. It would keep his daughter safe now. By morning, the call came from Child Protective Services. They wanted statements, clarifications, timelines. Daniel answered each question calmly, precisely. He corrected assumptions without raising his voice. He offered evidence before it was requested. That changed the tone of the conversation. Cases like this often shrank under pressure. Family disputes, discipline misunderstandings, rural misunderstandings. This one did not. At noon, Daniel met with a civilian attorney recommended by the legal officer he trusted, a former prosecutor, sharp, unimpressed by theatrics. "You did everything right," she said after reviewing the initial file. "That's rare." Daniel nodded. "What happens next?" "We widen the lens," she replied, "because this doesn't start or end with one afternoon." That afternoon, his daughter spoke for the first time without being asked. They were sitting on the back steps, sunlight warming the concrete. He said Mom agreed with him. She said quietly, "that you were too soft." Daniel kept his eyes forward. "Did she ever say that to you?" She shook her head. She just looked away. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. That night, he made the second set of calls. A former colleague now working in military family advocacy, a licensed therapist with experience in trauma cases involving authority figures, a compliance officer attached to a regional oversight board. No favors, no shortcuts, only proper channels, used properly. By the end of the week, the scope had expanded. The farmhouse was no longer treated as a single scene. Inspectors found records, journals, patterns of behavior disguised as tradition. Neighbors came forward once they understood they wouldn't be dismissed. Daniel's father-in-law stopped posturing and hired an attorney. That told Daniel everything he needed to know. His wife called again. This time she didn't argue. "I didn't know how to stop him," she said. Daniel's voice was even. "You stop someone by standing between them and your child." Silence. "I was afraid of him," she admitted. "So was she," Daniel replied. "And she had fewer options." The custody hearing was scheduled quickly. Daniel testified without embellishment. He didn't use his rank. He didn't reference deployments. He spoke as a father, nothing more. The judge listened. The ruling was immediate. Temporary sole custody granted to Daniel. Supervised visitation only. Mandatory evaluations. When Daniel told his daughter, she didn't cry. She just nodded. "I want to stay with you," she said. "You will," Daniel replied. That weekend, they drove past the old farmhouse. They didn't stop. They didn't need to. State tape marked the driveway. A notice posted on the door listed violations in language that carried weight. His daughter stared out the window until it disappeared behind the trees. "Is it really over?" she asked. Daniel considered the question carefully. "The part where you're alone," he said. "Yes." She leaned back in her seat, letting out a breath she'd been holding for months. At home, life resumed slowly. School counselors adjusted schedules. Teachers were discreet. Friends showed up with awkward kindness. Daniel cooked dinners he barely remembered how to make. He drove her to appointments. He learned when to talk and when to sit quietly. One evening, as they sorted laundry together, she looked at him. "Did you ever feel scared over there?" she asked. "All the time," Daniel said. "What did you do?" "I followed procedures," he replied. "And I trusted the people who earned it." She nodded thoughtfully. That night, Daniel received an update. The investigation was expanding beyond one individual. Complaints from other families. Prior reports that had gone nowhere. Systems that had failed quietly were being forced into daylight. Daniel closed his notebook and set it aside. He wasn't building a case anymore. He was watching one unfold. And for the first time since he came home, he allowed himself to believe that the ground beneath them was finally stable. But stability, Daniel knew, didn't come from relief. It came from resolution, and there was still one more step left to take. The formal charges were filed on a Monday morning. Daniel read the notice twice before setting it down. Not because he didn't understand it, but because seeing the words in black and white made the situation real in a way even the barn had not. Unlawful restraint, abuse of a minor, endangerment, no euphemisms, no soft language. His daughter was at school when the call came. Daniel took it in the driveway, one hand resting on the hood of his truck, the autumn air sharp in his lungs. "They're moving forward," the prosecutor said, And we're not limiting this to one incident. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Good. The days that followed were orderly. Interviews, evaluations, scheduled appearances. His calendar filled with obligations that had nothing to do with the army, yet required the same discipline. His daughter began therapy twice a week. At first, she said very little. Daniel never pushed. He waited in the lobby, reading reports, answering emails, letting the process work. One afternoon, she came out and sat beside him instead of walking straight to the car. I told her about the barn, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. That wasn't easy. She looked at him. She didn't look shocked. That told Daniel everything. At home, his wife's absence settled into something permanent. She called once more. I'm staying with my sister, she said. I don't know what comes next. Daniel's voice stayed steady. What comes next depends on whether you're willing to be honest with yourself first. She didn't answer. That silence made the decision for both of them. The restraining order was upgraded. Permanent separation was recommended. Legal filings followed, each one another door closing on the life they'd shared. Daniel didn't mourn it the way he thought he might. Some things ended the moment trust broke. Paperwork just caught up later. Midweek, a federal liaison reached out, not because Daniel asked, but because patterns had emerged. The farmhouse wasn't the only place his father-in-law had influence. Community groups, youth programs, informal mentorships no one had questioned because he spoke loudly about values and discipline. Daniel listened carefully. You won't be involved beyond testimony, the liaison said. But your reporting triggered the review. Daniel understood what that meant. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was prevention. Friday night, Daniel and his daughter sat on the couch watching a movie they barely followed. She leaned against his shoulder without asking. Halfway through, she spoke. He told me no one would believe me. Daniel paused the screen. Do you know why he said that? He asked. She shrugged. Because he thought he was important. Daniel nodded. People who rely on silence always do. She thought about that, then smiled faintly. You didn't stay silent. No, Daniel said. I didn't. The first court appearance was brief. No dramatics. No statements to the press. Daniel sat in the gallery while attorneys spoke and the judge listened. His father-in-law didn't look at him. He didn't need to. The evidence spoke clearly enough. That night, Daniel filed the last set of documents. Custody finalized. Divorce proceedings initiated. Residence transfer approved. He closed the folder and placed it in a drawer. He wasn't collecting trophies. He was clearing space. On Sunday they went hiking. Nothing strenuous, just a trail through open woods where the sky broke clean through the trees. His daughter walked ahead this time, pointing out birds, stopping to take photos. At one point she turned back toward him. Are you going to leave again? She asked. Daniel stopped. No, he said. Not like before. She nodded, satisfied. As the sun dipped low, Daniel's phone buzzed. One message. The investigation had widened again. Additional safeguards implemented. Names removed quietly from places they never should have been. Daniel slipped the phone back into his pocket. Some battles didn't end with noise. They ended with systems corrected, doors closed, and people who would never again be alone with the vulnerable. That evening, as they sat at the kitchen table eating dinner he'd nearly burned, his daughter laughed. It was quick, unplanned, real. Daniel watched it happen and felt something loosen in his chest. The final outcomes would come soon. He knew that. But the most important one had already arrived. She was safe. And the man who had believed isolation made him powerful was discovering, slowly, officially, and permanently, how wrong he'd been. The sentence came down on a quiet morning. No cameras, no speeches. Daniel read the notice alone at the kitchen table while the coffee cooled beside him. His father-in-law had accepted a plea deal. Multiple counts. Prison time measured in years, not months. Permanent registration. A lifetime ban from any position involving minors. The system had finished what it started. Daniel folded the paper once and set it aside. His daughter was still asleep upstairs. She had stopped waking in the night weeks ago. No more sudden gasps. No more lights left on until dawn. Healing didn't announce itself. It revealed itself in absence. When she came down later, hair still messy, she poured cereal and sat across from him. Is it done? She asked. Yes, Daniel said. It's done. She nodded, absorbing it quietly. Then, after a moment, she smiled, small, but real. "Can we get pancakes?" she asked. Daniel laughed. "Yes, we can get pancakes." Life moved forward in unremarkable ways. School projects, therapy sessions that turned from tears to reflection, weekend chores that ended in music playing too loud in the kitchen. Daniel stayed home. Requests to return overseas came and went. He declined without guilt. Some missions were finished. Others had simply changed shape. The divorce finalized without drama. Assets divided. Contact reduced to logistical messages that grew shorter over time. His wife never contested custody again. Whether from regret or understanding, Daniel didn't ask. He focused on what mattered. One afternoon, as they cleaned out the garage, his daughter found an old duffel bag from his early deployments. Patches sewn crookedly, sand still trapped in the seams. "You used to live out of this?" she asked. "For a while," Daniel said. She ran her fingers over the fabric. "I'm glad you're here now." Daniel met her eyes. "So am I." Spring arrived slowly. Trees filled in. The world softened around them. At a school assembly, his daughter stood on stage and spoke about resilience, about trust, about adults who choose to listen. Daniel sat in the back row, hands clasped, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Pride without fear. Afterward, she found him in the crowd. "Did I do okay?" she asked. "You did great," he said. "You were brave." She shook her head. "I was honest. That was better." Months later, Daniel received a final update from the liaison who had overseen the broader investigation. Safeguards implemented, programs dismantled, quiet reforms that would never make headlines. That was fine. Not every victory needed an audience. On the first Thanksgiving they spent alone, Daniel cooked badly and laughed about it. They ate at the table together, plates warm, windows open to crisp air. His daughter raised her glass of soda. "To being home," she said. Daniel raised his. "To being safe." That night, as he locked the door and turned off the lights, Daniel understood something fully for the first time. War had taught him how to survive. This had taught him how to protect. And if you've been listening this far, subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. It helps more than you know.